Hello interwebs and welcome to my channel. So for today's video, I'm going to be doing a Patreon sponsored review of the first episode of the She-Ra and the Princess of Power Netflix series, the reboot, I think 2018 reboot of the She-Ra series. This is a Patreon sponsored review, which means someone out there, just like you, gave to my Patreon page at a certain level and asked me to review this episode. You can go on my Patreon and have me review episodes or even review whole movies or franchises or seasons of television, depending on where you give. Help make content like this and have me give my thoughts on something that interests you. So that's my little plug for my Patreon page there. Okay, so to jump into the actual review, I had never seen anything related to She-Ra or He-Man or anything like that. I never got into it when I was a kid. I was vaguely aware of it, so I knew like Grayskull and I think Skeletor is a He-Man thing, and you know, the power of Grayskull.
By the power of Grayskull.
Yelly thing that He-Man would do, but I really had no awareness of really much of the mythology or idea behind that entire franchise. And I've heard a lot about She-Ra, particularly because, I'm kind of entrenched in the queer community as well, not just the nerd community. And She-Ra seems to be one of those really adored animated series that the queer community, the geek queer community, really has latched onto. Similar to in something like Steven Universe is another show that kind of has that sort of queer nerd overlap that a lot of people love. And so I'm honestly surprised that I hadn't watched this yet. I mean, female empowered, queer loved animated series that's fairly quick and bingeable is like right up my alley for shows that I really love. So I'm actually surprised it took me this long to get around to watching it. I'm actually thankful to my Patreon for asking me to do it, because now I'm gonna just say it, I'm fully on board to watch the rest of the show. I'm actually very excited to sort of delve deeper, and I may even do more reviews of it as I get further in, especially because I know I'm releasing this before season 4 comes out, which I think season 4 comes out next month sometime, which is surprising me because I just think season 3 just came out, so they're getting them out pretty quickly. After watching this first episode, I am very on board with this series. I'm super fascinated to see where it goes. And I only watched the first part, I think it's called The Sword, Part 1. The artwork is gorgeous. And something that, like, I'm sure no one else has made this connection, but something that this reminds me of is, like, the old 90s Sonic the Hedgehog show, where, like, Dr. Robotnik had, like, this evil mecha corporation. He destroyed the planet, evil industrialist smog-filled area that the Horde has in She-Ra. And then there's like the freedom fighters on the other side, which are like little critter animals that are like fighting up against Dr. Robotnik. And I kind of got the similar feel here, and I adore those old Sonic cartoons, as cheesy as they were. So evoking that just brings me back a lot of smiles, though it's sort of a weird connection to make. I'm sure that people will be like, why you could actually Sonic the Hedgehog? But the art style for both, that sort of industrialized Horde side and then the Resistance had this really like beautiful fairy tale-esque look to it. Just is absolutely gorgeous. The animation style, as much as I love the art, this is something that like kind of bugs me a little bit with some modern day animation styles nowadays, is like the lines of the characters, like the black lines like around different details, are like really thin. And so everything feels like it kind of bleeds into each other really well, like the characters kind of bleed into it. And I'm not sure I'm a big fan of that. Like you go back and watch like older shows and there's sort of like a more thicker outlining on different pieces of, characters and detail and things like that in the animation that makes them pop a little bit more. And this is just an animation style. I think the current Pokemon series has a very similar animation style to this, even though I don't really watch Pokemon. And it's just a style. I don't think there's anything wrong or bad about it. It's just something that I'm sort of like noticing that doesn't hit me really well, but that doesn't go against the art in and of itself. I think it's gorgeous art, just that sort of like borderline stuff. It just bothers me a little bit, but that's something I can easily get over. And I'm sure someone who knows a lot more about the intricacies of animation will tell me why that is. Maybe it's a budgetary thing, stylistic choice. I'd be curious to hear about it in the comments. Something I already am well aware of, having just started watching this 5 minutes in. I love Catra. Catra is probably going to be my favorite, chaotic neutral, chaotic evil characters, but definitely a chaotic focused character, and I kind of adore those sort of chaotic characters. And so I just know I'm gonna love Catra. I love her design. I love her like differing eye colors. I do know a little bit about how Adora is gonna go over to the side of the Resistance, and I know that kind of comes up later on in the series. I know she kind of goes up against Catra. So I think that's a really intriguing relationship that I'm curious to see built up. I'm also curious because, again, like I said, I know the queer community really has latched onto this show, so I'm curious are Catra and Adora together or have feelings for each other? Because like Catra's like sleeping on the end of Adora's bed in one scene. Just they kind of like sleep in the same bed together, and she sleeps there like a cat, which was intriguing to me. So I'm curious if there's some sort of queer feelings going on there. Maybe it's just a queer coded thing and it doesn't ever become explicit. I don't know. I haven't seen the rest of the series. Maybe there are other queer characters throughout the series. But that's just something that like hit me, and I'm like, that's interesting to me. And I kind of love it, and I really kind of hope that's where it goes. But we'll see. I do not know for sure how that ends up. And like I said, this has only been half an hour. I only watched the first episode, but I am curious story-wise. I mean, like I said, I know Adora eventually goes to the side of the Resistance, so it seems like a fairly similar story as like, oh, she used to work for, you know, the Horde, and then she goes to the other side. She's got this magical power. She's the chosen one and goes up against the Horde and tries to defeat them and gets balance between the two and, you know, help nature versus, you know, industrialized society, sort of environmentalist message. Seems fairly standard to me, though I am curious to see how the mythology develops over the course of the series, because there is definitely room for a deep mythology with like the references to Grayskull, and again, I don't know much about the mythology of He-Man, so I don't really know what Grayskull is. So I'm curious to see how that mythology deepens and hopefully complicates the narrative. That seems fairly standard to me, even though I find the characters to be fascinating in and of themselves. One thing that I didn't really love, but I am on board to see how it develops, is the character of Glimmer and her relationship with her mom. So Glimmer is clearly fighting the Horde, and she's like a leader in fighting the Horde, but then she gets like grounded by her mom, and this is something that does weird me out a little bit, and it kind of comes up in anime too, and comes up in a lot of animation stuff, is that like the characters are kids and are treated as kids, and yet they're also fighting like big war battles. And so there's like this disconnect. It's like you're going to be grounded, and yet you're like fighting a war. And that's just like this weird disconnect between being treated as a kid and being treated as an adult. Like you probably murdered and captured people, but you're also being grounded as a little kid. That's a me thing, and I know that's sort of like a style of the anime genre in general. It's something that weirds me out a little bit, and something I just kind of have to get over. I mean, I know that's one of my hang-ups and why I never always got into anime or animation. There are certain anime and animation shows that I adore, like Death Note is one of my personal favorite animes and personal favorite shows of all time. But when it gets into this, it just that sort of like disconnect bugs me, just because it's feeling like half and half. Like usually I'm all on board for things being mystical and weird, or things being kind of played seriously, and this is like being played seriously, but also having like this mystical, like sort of put aside your, you know, your disbelief for a little bit here. So I'm just, again, curious to see how that develops, but that's something that kind of bugged me just watching it initially. So yeah, I am fully on board to watch more of the series. That's my sort of initial thoughts, just coming off of one episode of the show. I'm curious to hear what all of you have to say. Do you guys love She-Ra? Have you never seen She-Ra and are now interested in it? Do you never want to watch it for X, Y, and Z? Have you watched the original He-Man or She-Ra series? Love to hear all of your thoughts in the comments below. And like I said, I may even do some updates later on as I get more into the series and see if I love it or hate it. Don't forget to subscribe if you want to catch more reviews or my discussions of Star Trek stuff or geek topics or nerd stuff or, you know, political stuff. That's what my channel's about. Please get to my Patreon page. Every little bit counts. It helps me pay the rent. It helps me improve the quality of my sort of big main show videos that aren't just me talking at a camera for you. Every little bit just means a lot to me, and it helps me stay motivated as a creator. So, and special thanks to my Admiral level Patreons, Stephen Schuhart, Wellington Marcus, and Lol. Thank you so much. I can't tell you how thankful I am for everything you guys have given. It really means the world to me. But regardless of if you subscribe or if you give to my Patreon, I want to thank you for watching this video, and until next time, as always, live long and prosper.